Storytelling has to be in the present moment. When a storyteller is there and the story listeners are there, one can't do without the other. They share that time. It's live. It has to be in the present moment. Okay? I was aware of that. See what you got me to think? And then I became aware of, okay, so when I looked up the word story and storied, and I won't give you all the definitions, they're all there for you to read and take away with you, I thought, okay, so do the stories have to be true? And do the story listeners, do they relate to those true stories? Do the stories have to be fictional? Does the storyteller tell the story the way if I was sitting at, say, a heritage talk? Because I do heritage talks for people if they ask. Does the storyteller tell the truth about a past history? And then I realised his story, the word history. I didn't go into that one yet. So what's the difference? Can a story be fictional? Can it come from truth? And then I remembered my old friend Peter Drever, the man many decades ago in Strongness I made a promise to, that if there was only 4 or 5 people wanting to sit around the fire and hear the legends and customs and stories of the people who work the land and fish the sea here, I would try to find a way to do that. And basically he used to say, it's an ancient oral living tradition. And remember, Lynn, the people that work the land and fish the sea, they passed down that wisdom and knowledge of the land and sea, and their stories and their legends and their songs and their ballads. None of it was ever passed down by a written word. It was by word of mouth. And then Peter Drever, and I tell the audience this very often, Peter Drever would say to me, and he would laugh, and he would say, like very many Arcadians, this last line, and leave it with me, and remember, Lynn, there is always truth in legend. That took me, what you both asked me, right back to what Peter had said. But then I had to ask myself, okay, if it's live and present, I had to ask myself, one of the first questions that Gautama asked me, is there an agreement between the story listeners and the storytellers? Okay, so if the storyteller is narrating, that's a tradition of the Skald. That's why every storytelling here, I looked up the Skald, the tradition of the Sagaman, and they would narrate to put into place and context where the people, the characters, the creatures, where the action was going to be. That's a narration. It's still telling a story. It's telling something that was happening in the past, very often in the ancient times of that community. But then again, the balladeer came through Central Europe, all the way up through England and Scotland, and what were they doing? They were singing. They were singing their stories. But then I found out that the ballads came with the Scots people here. They were singing their stories. So what's a poem? Then I had gone in this webinar I've told you about, which I'll give you the information about, and this one man said, named someone who was a poet, but they said all his poems were stories. So then I wandered about and thought about, well, what about the puppeteer? And what about the cultures I really would love to know more about, and I have gone into some of them, some of the most ancient cultures in the world who wore masks. Kabuki Japanese theatre, the Egyptian, the Native American, the Celtic, the Indian, all of them had masks. They're ancient, because in ancient tribes they used to believe the mask was a bridge between the human and their gods or goddesses. So what about them? Were they performing? Was that story? Was that tellers? I think I couldn't answer all, but maybe I'll do a dissertation and send you it. But what I did realise that came out of it was I was telling it live, and storytelling has to be live to have that contract or that sharing as one unit. It's its own medium. It's not a performing product. I wasn't producing anything. I don't have these stories written in scripts, but I have productions of plays and musicals and folk art dramas that I've done with many kinds of junior people and adults for the Edinburgh Fringe or anywhere. It's a Magnus Festival. But I have no scripts for these. I have my own notes for who Bessie Millie is. I have my own notes for who the Selkie woman is. I have my own notes of poor assy paddle when he was trying to kill the stoorworm. But I realised it's not a product. It's a medium in its own right, but it has to be alive. And the other thing that was very important, and it came from, again, me asking the question to all the workshops when I was developing communication arts, many decades, what's the difference between creative arts and expressive arts, was that not only live, but it was in the imagined world. And you arrive in time for me not to look up imagination in the dictionary, because I think that's a whole other field we'll talk about. But I asked myself about storytelling is in the imagined world, the imagination of the listener and the storyteller. And therefore, that's when I realised, perhaps, I don't know, is that the difference between if I'm telling, as Peter Drever said, the truth behind the legend in the story? It has to be in the imagined world, imagination, from, say, me listening to someone giving a talk on the heritage of the Pictish people or the heritage of Scarabray, the Stone Age village. Is that the biggest difference? Is it has to be in the imagined world, you know? And that all came out of the two questions you asked me.